This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about the most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. Guys, thank you for being here. I'm glad to have you all listening. Thank you to everybody who recently found the show. You've been downloading and binge listening to the show. That's always wanted and appreciated. And just a reminder, if you love the show and you want to support it monetarily, which I appreciate, like you've heard all the free content and you think, let me give Steve a couple shekels, you can do that. Do the link in the show notes to Patreon, and on Patreon there's different levels you can choose from patrolman all the way up to captain. But if you go sergeant or above, you get a shout out on the show, and you get additional Cops in the News, a live stream that we do, and you get the replay of that. So, and it goes into the podcast and on YouTube. Also, if you just want a heads up when the live streams are going to happen, go to thingspolicey.com, scroll down, and enter your email. Just subscribe. I don't send out a ton of newsletters or anything like that, but I will every couple of weeks when a live's going to happen. You'll get an email with links to it and the time and in date it's going to happen. So it makes it easier to catch it. And you don't need to be a member of the Patreon for that. You can watch it live. Just anybody can watch it live. So that's just a heads up. So today's guest, very excited to have him. He is a sheriff, head of an agency, an elected official. He did 3 years municipal when he first started, then went over to Orange County Sheriff's Office in Florida. He rose to second in command. It's the fourth largest sheriff's office or fourth largest law enforcement office in the state of Florida. And I think he said 13th largest in the country. So pretty big job. He then retired, started a very successful private security company, sold that, became the undersheriff for Flagler County Sheriff's Office, and then was pressured by the community into being the sheriff of the county, which he is now. He also is on the show Booked on A&E. He's done 50 years in law enforcement, and he's still going, which is incredible. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Sheriff Rick Staly. Rick!
Hey, good morning, Steve.
Oh, sir, thank you so much for joining us. I told you right before we came on, I said, these Florida sheriffs, they're like, we up here in the Northeast, we see you guys and we go, number one, we go, geez, looks like these guys are having a lot of fun. Number two, how do we get one in office in the Northeast? Would that ever happen?
Well, you've had a couple over the time. The Milwaukee sheriff, David Clark, years ago, was a Florida-style sheriff. But, I probably would not be successful in the North. Sheriff's office in the South is a law enforcement, full service law enforcement agency, just like a city police department. We do law enforcement. Most agencies in Florida do corrections and then the court system, whereas the northern sheriffs tend to be relegated to courts and maybe jails, those kind of things. Not always, but it's
That's
a very,
true.
very different way of policing. Plus, we're in the free state of Florida, and I'm a constitutional officer, which means that I'm elected by the people. The people can remove me, or the governor can remove me, but I don't report to anybody other than the people. Once I'm elected, I get my budget from the county commission. But once I receive the budget, frankly, by Florida law, I can do anything I want with it after that, move money around. So I have a total independence. So I don't have to ask permission to go do something. If I think it's right for this agency, right for the community, I just do it. And so far, it's been very successful. I was reelected unopposed in 2024. And in 2020, I was reelected at 70% of the vote. 2016 campaign, I call that the spirited campaign of 2016. There was 9 of us running for sheriff. So
Wow.
it was quite chaotic, but I survived all the challengers, and community seems to be very happy.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you're right about the jails thing up here. Of course, that is with police reform Massachusetts went through and our need for certified post officers and how the standards have changed. We actually are, some sheriffs in Western Mass are starting to supplement. They're giving deputies who have been academy trained to larger agencies to kind of supplement their patrol. So that kind of is changing. I always thought that was weird about the Northeast, where, because you think sheriff growing up, you think Wild West, you think lawman, you think all that. And then, when you learn in Massachusetts, you learn that the sheriffs are really relegated to prisoner transport and managing the prisons. It's very odd to me. It's so odd, actually, that there is a court case where they taught us about an academy where it's not really clear their authority in the law. But a sheriff did stop, I think on the way back from a detail, stopped a drunk driver and arrested him. And the judge did say in his disposition, he said, it would be ridiculous to say a deputy sheriff couldn't stop a motor vehicle for OUI. Just he couldn't even process it, although couldn't cite the law. So it went through fine. Because, it's just weird. And then the other piece for you is the sheriffs we have now in Mass. I mean, there's a lady lawyer who wears pantsuit that's sheriff of the Cape Cod, of Barnstable County. She's never been a cop, but she's the sheriff of the county.
Well, my predecessor, that was a situation with my predecessor, so I think that's why the community asked me to run for sheriff, and because he was a lawyer, had never been a cop, and the agency was in shambles. Coming from a big agency, I knew what this agency was supposed to be doing. So, in Florida, under the statute, a sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. And legally, I have 2 small police departments in my county. Legally, I could go in if I didn't like the way that they were handling a call. I could say the sheriff's office is taking that call, and there's absolutely nothing they can do about that. But I have a good relationship with my 2 police chiefs, so we have handled some high-profile calls for them because they're very small police departments. But we worked that out in advance. And so fortunately, I haven't had to use that. But that is the authority that a sheriff in Florida has.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you don't want to have sour grapes with your chiefs, cause all kind of problems.
And all our deputies are state certified through the Florida Criminal Justice Standards and Training. So it's not like, decades ago when there was no requirement. Our requirement now is over 800 hours of training for a law enforcement deputy and almost 400 hours of training for a detention deputy. So, we do have standards. My agency is a 5-diamond agency. We're accredited by 5 different accreditation bodies. So we're really a professional, his-level sheriff's office.
Yeah. Sounds like, Mass is the same now. I think it's over 800 hours to get your, I guess now with post, it's your license or whatever. So Sheriff, I have to ask you about this TV show, cause it always, like, I put myself in the seat of being an administrator and being approached. And the first thing I would think is, like, you want to videotape in my jails and on the street with my deputies. It just feels very exposing, even if you have the utmost confidence in your agency. It doesn't. Did you feel a little bit of pullback at first? Like, whoa, let me see what the terms are of this.
Well, I did not, but my division chief did. And in fact, he recommended against doing this, and I overruled him. I'm a very transparent sheriff. We tell the agent or the community what's going on in our community, and that includes the jail. And I thought it was important to highlight and showcase the men and women that work in our detention facility, because unless you get arrested, and we arrest about 300 people a month, they're never seen. The law enforcement, they get all the focus, right? Because body cameras, car cameras, you name it, they're handling those high profile incidents. But yet you got just as equal a team that's in the detention side. And I thought the community in our county, and of course across the country, should see what it's like to be a detention deputy, what they have to deal with, their responsibilities, not just for the inmates, but the booking, but for their fellow deputies, and what they have to deal with. Because, most detention facilities deal with a lot of characters, and sometimes they're on drugs, they're drunk, and people react differently. And so I just thought it was important to show it. A spinoff that I really didn't count on is that while a lot of agencies across the country or having a hard time hiring people. I don't. I'm actually overhired in my jail, and I'm overhired in my law enforcement side.
Nice.
And I attribute that because not only are we a professional agency and pretty well known by what we do in this agency, but Booked and the other shows that we're on have helped market our agency across the country.
That's great. Yeah, that's a nice little side piece of that. That makes sense. People get to see it, a lot of optics on it, and they want to join up. So you got overhired, so you got approved for, or I guess you already have the budget. So if it's in your budget, you can do it.
Correct. So, I'm the one that makes that decision, and there's always a lag time in the hiring process, and we know that annually we're going to turn over, whether retirements or resignations, whatever the reason, about a dozen on my law enforcement side and about 5 or 6 on my detention side. And it takes really close to a year, especially if you have to send them to the academy for them to be fully trained. And so I have the capability in my budget, and being an independent constitutional sheriff, I authorized overhire in both of those divisions so that I can keep my staffing levels up. And so far, it's worked out great. In fact, we have a waiting list right now to join our agency.
I love it.
Let me just say, anybody listening to this, if they're interested, they can go to joinflaglersheriff.com and learn more about us.
Nice. I like it. That's excellent. Yeah. Hopefully you don't get any of these TikTok cops on there trying to get in just so they can get on video,
Hopefully not.
Can you go way back in your career and tell us about the first hot call you responded to, the first call you responded that really like gave you an adrenaline dump?
So, I guess what I would say to that is, in a 50-year career, there's a number of hot calls, right? But back early in my career with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, we had a lot of issues with motorcycle gangs occurring. And of course, Orange County, Florida is where Disney World is, SeaWorld, the theme parks, if you will. And back then, we did not have portable radios. So we had a joke. The city police in Orlando had portable radios, and we used to tell them, you want to be a real cop, come to the sheriff's office where you have to fight your way back to your car to call for help. Little rivalry between the two agencies, right? So one day on South Orange Boston Trail, which is a pretty, at the time, pretty risque part of the county and high crime area, I pulled over this motorcycle and go up to the driver. And the most prevalent motorcycle gang that we had in Orange County at that time in Central Florida was the Outlaw Motorcycle Gang. A local chapter president, his name is Crazy Joe Spaziano, and he's been convicted of multiple murders. He's still alive. He's in prison. So the guy that I pulled over, of course, I didn't know at the time, was his brother. And he was riding a stolen motorcycle. Didn't know that at the time either. And he was also wanted for a homicide. So imagine me up there on this, what I hate the word routine, but just a normal everyday traffic stop for a traffic violation. And I find out I have Crazy Joe's brother. And so I'm having to keep an eye on him. I'm having to walk backwards to my car to be able to call for a backup because of who I got. They're generally armed. But he actually surrendered without any issues. But, it was certainly a little bit of a shock when I found out who I had. He didn't have any ID, but he actually told me his real name, which was even crazier.
That's wild. Yeah, that's great. It's funny. That's what's so tough about police work. And you might get somebody you think you can totally trust. It seems like a guy going for a weekend ride who attacks you. You have this badass and he's compliant.
Correct. You just never know. I mean, when you make arrests, and, I've made a lot of arrests in my career, the suspect, the person that you're going to arrest, has to make a choice. And there's one of 3 choices they can make. They can surrender, they can flee, or they can resist. Now, many times the way you handle yourself, because the dirtbag's going to size you up.
Right.
And if you handle yourself where they don't think they can get away with it, then it's more likely they're going to make the right decision in there. But that's not a decision that you can make for them. Every person you arrest has to make that own decision.
Yeah. And that goes a lot with command presence and, even just how your uniform looks. I remember we had a class in that in police academy where the FBI interviewed people who murdered cops or horribly assaulted cops. And that's exactly what it was. It was like the watering hole at the Serengeti. The hyenas and the lions, they look at the lion, they go, does he look mangy? Is he dirty? Does he look like he's been exiled from his pride? Or is he put together, polished boots, tucked in shirt, not a soup sandwich? You know what I mean?
Correct.
And they kind of decide that way. Yeah. Sheriff, can you describe the most strange or most bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
Well, again, when you're in this career, for 50 years, all of that kind of runs together. But I think probably one of the funniest things that I had occur is back in those days in Orange County, again, in that same Orange Blossom Trail area, we had CB radios that we installed in our patrol cars. So deputies, we would talk amongst ourselves, mainly so our supervisor wouldn't really know what we were doing, frankly, back then. And but I kept mine on CB19, which is, back in the day, it was what truckers used, it was like the emergency channel. And somebody got on there and said, any police around? And I picked it up, and they alerted me to a burglary in progress, and I was just a couple blocks away. So as I rolled up on it, I see this guy coming out the broken window pane of this seafood restaurant, had something in his hand. I couldn't really tell what it was at that point. I had a civilian rider with me, civilian employee that was riding with me that day. So I challenge him, draw my gun, challenge him. He drops what he has in his hands and takes off running. I chase after him, and back in that era, you could use deadly force for burglaries. Okay, you can't do that today under the Gardner decision, but back then you could. And I started to fire, a shot at him, and I just thought, I'm not going to shoot this guy in the back for a burglary. And he ran across South Orange Blossom Trail and went into this big storage area of heavy equipment, and I lost sight of him. So we did a perimeter and couldn't find him. Had canines out. Actually, the sheriff was out that night and came to the scene. He wanted to know why I didn't shoot him. He told me that he could afford a 29-cent bullet in there. But so then I go back to my patrol car, and I asked my rider, what did he have in his hands? Well, he had stolen about 4 lobster that he had in a metal canister. And I said, well, where are the lobster? He had put them in the back seat of my patrol car. And so now my car smells like a lobster. But later on that day, that night, my sergeant had gone home not feeling well, and I'm picking up paperwork. And I'm checking reports, and one of the guys on the perimeter had gone to a disturbance call at the Dollhouse, which was a topless bar on South Orange Blossom Trail. And he arrested this guy for disorderly intox. And I'm reading the description of this guy. And it was a guy that ran from me. And so I went to the jail and I said, is this guy still here? Yes, he's in a holding cell with like a dozen other people. And I said, well, don't tell me which one he is. Just take me to the holding cell and let me look. So I looked and I pointed at this one. I said, I want him for burglary. And I arrested him and he pled guilty. So, it just goes to show that you may not get them initially, but they are eventually going to get caught. And so what this guy had done was not only had he stole the lobster, but he stole the cash. He took the cash, went to the Dollhouse, he got drunk, caused caused a disturbance there and got himself arrested. And so we still got him, but it was kind of a memorable case because of the lobster and
Yeah.
the dollhouse connection, and then him pleading guilty to the burglary charge.
Boggles the mind. You imagine committing a felony for lobster,
Yeah, you didn't even get a chance to eat them. Of course, I wasn't real happy with my rider that day because now I had just cleaned my car. We had take-home patrol cars, and now it smelled like a lobster, so I had to clean it again, the next day, so I didn't smell like a lobster everywhere I went, but it was kind of funny. That guy, by the way, is now my chief of staff at the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, the guy that put the lobster in the back of my car, so obviously I didn't hold that against him.
Yeah. Well, pretty proactive for a civilian rider. He got out and grabbed the lobster and threw it in the back.
Yep, that's true.
That's great. Now you got the governor's medal for heroism for a big incident, and the next question I ask is the most intense or terrifying call. I'm assuming this would be the call.
It was actually the call that I'll talk about, and then one about 30 days later.
Okay.
And they kind of tie together. So I was the acting shift supervisor, Orange County, back in that era when I was a young deputy sheriff, much smaller agency than it is today, or even when I was undersheriff there. So we get this call about an attempted firebombing at the Exxon gas station in West Orlando. And so myself and another deputy go there. I'm his backup. When we get there, the suspect is gone. And we find out later that a trooper had been flagged down by the gas station owner and pointed out this guy, and the trooper's trying to follow him. Radio technology is not like it is today. There was not good communication, especially between agencies. And so we couldn't find the trooper where their dispatcher was telling us where he was. So the deputy and I split up, and the other deputy finds him down in an impoverished area of unincorporated area on the southwest side of Orlando. And so he calls out. I now drive over there, and this guy is just raising all kind of cane, and said that they had worked on his car and now his car didn't run. It turned out later he didn't even own a car. And so we told him to calm down or we're going to arrest him for disorderly conduct. Well, remember what I said earlier? You got to make a choice, right? The suspect has to make a choice whether you're going to fight, flee, or surrender.
Yep.
And so the other deputy went up to him. Now, this guy had already told us he was going to fight us. So I perceived him right. I'm not sure this other deputy did. He did not stay much longer in law enforcement after this incident. And so he went up to him and said, "Sir, I'm afraid I'm going to have to arrest you." Well, this guy decided to take off running. He's a faster runner than I am, the deputy is. And so the deputy tackles him. And as I'm running up, I see the deputy on the bottom, the guy's on top of him, and the deputy is frantically pushing this guy off of him. He had grabbed the deputy's gun.
Oof.
And now I'm within 6 feet. I'm going for my gun, running, very fast. During that time, I wore steel-toed boots. And I'm basically on top of them. And as they teach you in the academy, you should turn, make yourself a smaller target, and all of those kind of things. So I was in the process of doing that. Now, Steve, everything I'm telling you happened in 11 seconds. Okay. From the time I called in a foot chase to the time I called in that I'd been shot, 11 seconds. So that's how quick a relatively minor call can change.
Yeah.
So as I'm running up, grabbing my gun, back then we just carried revolvers, and I kicked him in the chest, which diverted him away from the other deputy. He pointed the gun at me. I'm still pulling my gun out. He fires 3 rounds. 2 hit me in my gun arm, and the third one hit me in the chest.
Oof.
and the one in the chest just knocked the you-know-what out of me, okay, because I'm basically on top of this. And I went down, and now I'm struggling. In fact, you can still see the scars on my arm today if you look, and you still see the chest impact. But fortunately, well, let me back up. I'm a little out of order here. So when I go down, I'm struggling to get my gun out, and he comes running up, pointing the gun down at me, and I hear all those gunshots, and I remember thinking, I was 20, 22 years old,
Wow.
and I was thinking, I always wondered how I was going to die. Now I know.
Ugh.
And I'm struggling, and I hear this gunfire going on. What I didn't know was another deputy that had heard the foot chase was down the road and had come into this gravel parking lot and saw my actual shooting. And he reached for his shotgun. We had shotgun mounts that mounted going straight up like dash mounts back then. And when he reached for his shotgun, it diverted the guy from me, and he was shooting at this other deputy. In fact, the bullets were going through the windshield at this deputy. They get out, exchange gunfire. The trooper fired one shot, and we hit him 7 times. Did not kill him. He was doped up on purple haze and LSD derivative. And the ambulance people tell me that the only thing he complained about, because we knew we were hitting him because we could see the marks coming on his shirt, but he wasn't going down. And the only thing that he complained about was where I kicked him. No, not the 7 holes that were in him. But what's ironic and fortunately, back then as a Orange County deputy sheriff, I was making $10,300 a year in a take-home car. I had bought my own protective vest, which turned out to be the best life insurance I could have ever got, because the agency had just started issuing protective vests, but they didn't think deputies would wear them in the heat in Florida. So they were only issuing front and rear panels. He got me in the chest as I was turning to make myself that small target. Had I been wearing the department issued vest, the ER doctor said that round would have killed me because it would have missed the vest. So it caught the side panel. And that's the only reason why I'm still here. And after that incident, my grandmother said, I'd really scared her and that she would pay for me to go to law school. And I said, no, Grandma, this is what I want to do. It's, I got to get back on that horse. So many, many years later, I thought maybe I should have taken her up on that, but and made it, a bunch of money or something. But so I was out of work for about 30 days, healing up my arm and cracked ribs. And I came back to work. So this time when I came back to work, they put me in a quieter, quote unquote, zone. It included the theme parks in Orange County and the hotel district, basically. My first call back, I was on the midnight shift, was a man with a gun at the Hotel Royal Plaza in Lake Buena Vista.
Oh, my gosh.
So the whole time, and we were very spread out back then. You didn't have backups my backup down there was 20, 25 minutes away. And so the whole time I was going down the interstate with my blue lights on, going to the Hotel Royal Plaza, my entire shooting kind of like visioned in my mind.
I bet.
And I get to the hotel, backup is still probably at that point 15 minutes away, and I take a gun off the guy and arrest him. So I guess that's a way, it's a quick way to get back on that saddle.
Yeah.
Wasn't really what I was expecting, but hey, I'm still here 50 years later, right?
Yeah. The big guy's got your back. God's looking out for you, brother.
Without a doubt, that guy had me when I was down on the ground, and God looked out for me. There is no doubt in my mind because he had me.
ProForce Law Enforcement, the best damn cop shop in the nation, whether you're purchasing for an entire agency or you're an individual officer looking to buy firearms or duty gear. These guys are the best in the biz. ProForce has law enforcement exclusive pricing and is the place to be buying your guns and duty gear. They carry all the top industry brands, and the guys and gals that work there understand exactly what law enforcement officers need. Special discount link, tps.proforceonline.com. It's deeply discounted items just for the listeners of this show, or you can go to proforceonline.com and shop the whole place. Place is unbelievable. You can also visit Prescott, Arizona in person or Brea, California in person to get hands-on with the gear. All the contact stuff is in the show notes. Thank you, ProForce.
And, the scars on my arm, and I was smaller back then too. I was skinny as a rail. And, but I was able to save the other deputy's life. He went to prison. He was sentenced to 20 years, only served 6, because that was back when, Florida's prisons were overcrowded, so they were letting everybody out. He was arrested multiple times after that. He's now dead, in there. And, I survived it. Got the Governor's Medal of Heroism, not the way you want to get it. And a bunch of other awards, Kevlar Survivors Award, Medal of Valor, from the agency, stuff like that. But, I think as sheriff, that incident makes sure that I equip our deputies properly.
Yeah.
That we train them well. I don't know if you can see my badge, but I'm the only one that wears a 2-tone badge. It's silver in the center and gold on the 5 points, because I never want to forget where my roots were.
That's cool.
I used to go out on Friday nights patrols. I make my own arrests. I will admit my deputies probably have to help me with the paperwork when I make an arrest.
Yeah.
I don't do that often. I write my own tickets. In fact, I just wrote one last week. And I require all my command staff to serve as a watch commander. So I have permanent watch commanders, but I don't want them to forget where they came from and make decisions that impact people that they're commanding, and they don't remember what it's like out there. And so, and as sheriff, my story gives me instant credibility with my team.
Oh yeah.
In fact, the vest that saved my life is hanging up in our museum at our operations center.
No kidding. And vests back then, my dad was a cop 32 years when I was growing up, and I remember the early bulletproof vests. They hated them. They were thick. They pinched you. They were not. They were, an inch thick, level 3. They were. And I remember my dad every 5 years would get a new one, and every 5 years it was a little bit thinner, a little bit more flexible. And the guys were more willing to wear them.
Correct. But there's a lesson for leaders. If you have leaders that watch this podcast, is that ask your employees what they will wear. We had the bureaucrats of the Orange County Sheriff's Office back then make a decision on what they thought we would or would not wear. We were never asked.
Yeah.
And, who knows what the opinion would have been. I can just tell you that if I hadn't bought my own vest, that was like $200, but when you're only making gross $10,300 a year, that was a lot of money.
A lot of do-re-mi.
But it turned out to be the cheapest life insurance policy I could buy.
Absolutely. Yeah. The best thing I think for that's happened in the evolution for vests has been, and it's controversial in some places, and I get it, but the outer carriers, man, they are so much. My back and hips used to kill from wearing, like, if you go on a canine track with a full duty belt and you're chasing the canine officer the whole time, my hip flexors, my lower back would kill. And then they slowly but surely agencies started going to allow the outer carrier, and a lot of it was they were getting approached by the police unions, and the police unions were armed with information on back injury and hip injury. And after a while, although it doesn't have that nice traditional look, I can do a 16-hour shift now, and my hips and back do not hurt because of that.
So this has been a little controversial in my agency,
Uh-oh.
candidly. So my tactical teams have that, my canines have that, things like that. I authorize an outer carrier vest that looks like a uniform shirt,
Right.
but not the tactical vest for my deputies that are on patrol. My community doesn't want that military look as a daily wearer. And when you think about most interaction with law enforcement comes either victim of a crime or a traffic stop or a traffic crash. You know, our community is 140,000 population. We arrest 300 people a month, and not all of those are residents. So 3,600 a year. So there's a balance that you have to do. Now, my HR director's wife is a chiropractor. And what she will tell you, because the studies aren't done yet, is the outer carrier vest is just going to change the type of injury from the gear.
Oh,
So
boy.
instead of the hip and lower back issues, you're going to have shoulder and neck issues. I guess time will tell if she's right, but
Right.
you know, I've tried to balance the need by the agency's request, by the employees, and what the community's expectations are.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I have a buddy who's a chief who had the same thing where I had one and I sent him a picture and he was like, oh, I don't know. And he did do the one that looks like the uniform, like so that when guys take reports, they can take it off and breathe and all that. But I'm with you. Like I said, when I started the statement, like it's controversial. And I to this day, when I see an officer who has a traditional belt and uniform, I always think in my head, that looks sharp. And when I see what I'm wearing on other people, I go, you look like you're about to rappel in Afghanistan out of a helicopter.
Yeah. And it just depends on the community too.
Yeah.
You know, and what kind of relationship you have with your community. Because sometimes that appearance can be a barrier. And if you want to do community policing, in our agency, what we use is guardianship policing, which is a hybrid of community policing. Guardianship policing meaning that you're working in partnership with the community to be guardians. It might be the guardians of that one street, that neighborhood, you know, big section of the community. And we recognize that law enforcement officers are guardians also, but you can't do it alone. So we use a hybrid of community policing called guardianship policing.
I like that. I like that a lot better. Yeah, because I know there was always controversy with saying cops calling themselves warriors or whatever, you know, like, because that's kind of doesn't really, like you were saying, with like 90% of what the job is, it doesn't really, we're not on a battlefield, we're in our communities. So guardianship, that's a smart term to use. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sheriff, can you tell us about a positive or heartwarming call or situation you dealt with?
Well, first, I would just say personally, the birth of my daughter was probably the most heartwarming thing because she almost died at birth. So,
oh, geez.
And now she's married and very successful.
Beautiful.
But as far as heartwarming, I'll just talk about as sheriff, if that's all right.
Sure.
You know, there are many kids that have to, you know, the cards that they were dealt with just really weren't great, right? Either their parents aren't great or they have a medical issue like, you know, cancer in their young kids. And they want to go into law enforcement. And chances are they're not going to be able to, or they may not even live long enough to do that. And so when I find out about them in my community, I make them an honorary deputy. They come into my office, they get a ball cap, they get a badge, they get a certificate.
Nice.
And just to see their smile on their face and they just light up. In fact, this Wednesday, I'm going to be in Tallahassee, and myself and a number of other sheriffs are going to make DJ. DJ is the young man
Yeah.
that President Trump made an honorary Secret Service agent.
Mm-hmm.
We are making him honorary sheriffs in the state of Florida.
That's great.
And so, that's going to be a great time. In fact, I cleared my day just so I could go to Tallahassee, which is about 4 hours away each way, to be able to present this to him because he's such an amazing young man. I hope God heals him. But I guess it's in God's hands, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. That's so cool, man. Yeah, that was really, that was a tumultuous address that the president did anyways, but that was really telling when a certain side wouldn't stand up, wouldn't applaud a sick kid. That was absolutely, and in hindsight, I'm glad it happened because I hope it didn't hurt his feelings, but I'm glad that everybody saw that.
Yeah, I would guess, he's young enough that he probably didn't realize the political aspect of what that segment of elected officials did. But I think it showed the country what was going on. Obviously, I'm a Republican, so I'm biased, and
right.
Same
here.
I have a photo. I don't know if you can see it on the back of my desk there with President Trump.
Yep.
President Trump and my wife and I. And that was taken on April 10th of last year, before he was reelected as president. But he's just a down-to-earth guy and just, an amazing change agent, if you will, for our country.
Yeah, totally. Sheriff, really popular question on the show. Get a lot of mail about it. Advice to new officers. A lot of people that listening are on the fence. I even get emails of people say they heard you guys tell your stories and they became cops because of, which is amazing. What would you tell people for advice getting into the profession?
Well, I'll tell you what I tell people in the academy, because it would apply to this question. Police work is the same, no matter where you go. Okay, so a burglary is a burglary, a car crash, DUI arrest, DUI arrest. So all of that's the same, homicide, so forth. So what you really need to look at is, what community do you want to serve? Do they support you? Or my community does. So look at the community on where you want to serve, and look at the leadership in that agency. Because I ask my deputies to make split-second decisions, and we train them well, and we hope that they make the right decision. But every once in a while, you're going to have to make a fast decision on the use of the vehicle pursuit, if you will, or use of deadly force, or even a taser. Will the leadership back you? And I ask my deputies to be, let's be as correct as we can. I'm asking you to risk your life for me as the sheriff, because they work under my authority as a sheriff. They're considered the alter ego of the sheriff. When they're on that scene, they are the sheriff, because I can't be at every 122,000 calls that we handle a year.
Right.
So are they willing to back you when the chips go down, when you have to make that fast decision? So look at the agency, look at the leadership, look at the community. Is it an agency that's going to give you opportunity, or are you just going to be a number? And depending on what your career goals are, can they provide that? So, that's what I tell people. I've had a great career. I'm fortunate enough to be one of 67 sheriffs in Florida. Never dreamed of that, quite frankly, when I started my career. I thought I might be a police chief somewhere. that wasn't in God's plan. And I'm thankful that, frankly, it wasn't, because I have a lot more fun and I'm much more independent as a sheriff
Yeah.
than a police chief ever is. But that's what I would say is look at the community. Are they going to support you, or everywhere you go, is it going to be a fight? Because they don't like law enforcement, or what we
Right.
stand for. So, because other than that, the job's the same, no matter where you go.
Yep. I see that on the show, interviewing people from all around the country and the world. Cops are the same. It's the same mindset, the same, very, very similar type of people. Some of the guys from overseas I've interviewed is, oh man, are they handcuffed with what they can do? It's crazy. But yeah, in America, in Canada especially, it's very, very similar. Can we?
Yeah, I've been to Brazil. I've been to Costa Rica. I've seen the policing there. When I was in Brazil, it was at an invitation by the colonel of the state police in this one state in Brazil. And, it's very different policing down there. In their equipment, when I went down there, it was like they were in a time warp, that they were stuck in the 1960s compared to what, America policing was. So, it's very different, and we may not be perfect in America, but we really do things right.
Yeah, it is so different. My buddy went down to South America. I can't remember what country, but he put it on Facebook. He's standing there at like their country store or whatever with his hands up like this, and on either side of him is a local cop with their gun pointed at his head. Real gun for a funny picture. And the gun is like a World War II surplus, like 38 revolver or something. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, damn, man, that is incredible. And you could tell just by what the like old, really long, pancake holsters on a swivel, just a gun, no other use of force. I mean, and they were dressed like in green, like fatigues almost. It was just crazy.
But they're very proud. That's the one thing I noticed, was how proud their police officers were. And, but their equipment was, very, very old, like you just described.
Yeah.
I was staying in a 4-star hotel. The 4-star hotel was maybe a 2-star in America, and it still had a black and white TV.
That's incredible. Can we circle back to the very beginning when we were first talking? You said you were undersheriff, and then the community. I mean, you see people run for sheriff, and they are really going for it, and it's like pitted against somebody else or whatever is contentious. But you had the community kind of push you into it. How did that happen?
Well, I had been the undersheriff in Flagler County for 2 years. Didn't really know the sheriff. The sheriff was an attorney that had been elected. There were 2 guys that had traded off the role of sheriff for 16 years because they didn't like each other. And so there was not stability in the agency. And I left after 2 years with this guy, just not somebody I could work with.
Okay.
And so I had no intentions of running for sheriff. And my wife and I were traveling the country, and the community started calling me, "Will you run for sheriff?" And I said, "No." The community leaders kept calling me because they knew my background from Orange County, but they also knew I'd been a very successful businessman before we sold our security company to a national firm.
Total package.
Right. And so they kept calling. Finally, the owner of the local newspaper called me, and he said, "We need you to run for sheriff." And I said, "Look, I would make a great sheriff or a good sheriff. I don't want the hassle of getting there." And he said, "Have you looked at who's running for sheriff?" I said, "No, I'm in my motorhome. I'm in Montana." And he said, "When will you be back?" And he said, "I'll be back. We'll be back in about 2 weeks." And he goes, "Okay, before you close that door, will you promise me you'll look at who's running for sheriff?" I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So we get back 2 weeks later, and I'm looking at who's running for sheriff. Well, the incumbent sheriff's running for re-election. He'd been convicted of ethic law violations while in office. the former sheriff's running for re-election because these two don't like each other. And he had been convicted of ethic law violations while in office.
Oh my gosh.
And then there were people that frankly just weren't qualified. Okay. Some that didn't even live in this county, which you can do in Florida. Okay. And so my wife and the community kept calling, and I'm doing the research. My wife is saying, you need to run for sheriff for this community and that agency. Now, how many spouses want you to throw your hat into a political arena?
Yeah, who wants that headache?
Right. So, finally she said, look, if one of these 8 other people, there are 8 people already running, if any of these people get elected, we're moving because none of them are qualified to protect me. And then the incumbent sheriff, who was afraid I was going to run, actually pushed me over the top because I opened up the newspaper, and he had thrown me under the bus, I guess because he was afraid I was going to run.
Ugh.
That actually sent me over the edge. And I looked at my wife and I said, that's it. She said, what? Since you're on podcast, I won't say exactly what I said, but I said, I'm running for sheriff. And I call it the Spirited Campaign of 2016. The most in this county that's ever been raised for a sheriff's race, or really any race in this county, 50,000. I raised 286,000.
Wow.
And there was 9 of us running. So we're partisan races in Florida. So there were 6 Republicans, of which I am, 2 Democrats, which is what the incumbent was, and an independent. And I never had to run against the incumbent because he lost in his own primary. And the sheriffs have a saying in Florida that there are there are successful sheriffs and one-term sheriffs. So in other words, you have to be reelected one time to be considered a successful sheriff amongst your peers. So the guy that was my predecessor, he was a one-term sheriff twice in this county and lost in his own primary each time, which is totally unheard of. So if that gives your viewers an indication on what was going on in the community and the agency. And so that's how I got in the run. And here I am now. I just started my 3rd term in January, and I'm going to run again in 2028. And hopefully the community, will keep me because I'm having fun. We're doing great things in this agency. My crime's down over 50% since I've been elected sheriff. We're now a professional, cutting-edge, modern agency. I would put my real-time crime center up against anybody's in this country, not only for the technology that we use, but my employees. And I've got a motivated team that just works really hard and delivers for our community. My philosophy is this, Steve. We're the 3rd fastest growing county in the state of Florida right now. Okay. Just because we're growing doesn't mean we have to accept crime and increases. And our job actually is crime reduction. That's what our goal should be, is to reduce crime, not to accept any crime.
Absolutely.
And so we focus a lot of energy on that. We have a weekly crime maps meeting, kind of like the old ComStat, if you will, that New York City did decades ago. I can tell you that you don't want to get on if you're a suspect, you don't want to be highlighting our crime maps meeting because you're going to be in my hotel probably by the end of the week.
I like it, man. That's great. Fantastic. And so it's no wonder that you were contacted by a producer for a TV show with everything you got going on. Tell us a little bit about the show. It's 10/9 Central. It airs, and you're on the 3rd season?
Correct.
Booked first day in. So is it primarily what people go through when they're getting processed and learning their fate?
Correct. And so It's been a great partnership, quite frankly. It highlights the men and women that work in our detention facility and what they have to deal with. Some of the characters that we arrest, sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're just mean and angry. But it really gives you the inside view of a jail and the booking process and how people react to that. And I think it also shows how professional our detention staff is. And it's not the stereotype, it's not a dark dungeon facility. Ours is a very clean facility that we treat people with respect. We're not going to let them, attack us or beat up on us. But we try to de-escalate the situation because they may have had an encounter during that arrest and they're wound up from that and agitated. And our goal is to get them to calm down. Let's get through the booking process. You either bond out or you stay for an arraignment hearing before a judge the next day. We average about 200 inmates a night in our jail. We had been as high as about 330. But frankly, our crime is down so much, our population in the jail is down, which is not a bad thing. Might be a little bit slower for booked first day in for recording.
Yeah.
But when I see our men and women on this show, I just couldn't be prouder because they're delivering the vision and what I expect.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great, man. Sheriff, it was an honor to have you on the show. The link will be in the show notes for booked first day in. Also, I'll put your Instagram on there, and if anybody's looking for employment, we can point them towards your website and come join the team. Like I said, thank you so much for coming on. I got to do the outro to the show. Can you hang out for like 2 or 3 minutes?
Sure.
Awesome. The great Sheriff Rick Staly. Really, really fun episode. Thank you to him for coming on. A&E booked first day in 10/9 Central. I'll put a link, like I said, to the episodes on there. They're in season 3 now. Fantastic show. Guys, this is a time in the show when I thank the Patreon sponsors. You go sergeant or above, you will get a shout out on the show. Who I'm talking about is, these are the lieutenants, let me say first. The great and powerful Andy Biggs. Kyle Roberts, everybody. Thank you, Kyle. Michael Roach from Roach Machines. Check them out. AI solutions there. The great Thomas Connell. Thank you, Lieutenant Connell. Now to the, I almost said sheriffs, now to the sergeants. Adam Alexander, Adam McMahon, Adam Mihal, Ben Peters, Bentley Barnett, Brad Thompson, Brett Lee, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Great woodworker. Check him out on Instagram. Sherry Finch. Thank you, Clark LaCuff. Thank you, Dave Ellman, Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. Hope you're enjoying Wyoming. Dylan Mosher, Elliot Sykes, Gabriel Decknob, Gary Steiner, George, Carey, Otis, Greg Gadboy, Jackson, Dalton, Black Box Safety, everybody. James Rose, Jason Labrie, Jason Loud, Jessica King, John Jordan, John Shoemaker, John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, everybody. Lisa Gano, holding it down to dispatch. Marcus Johansson, ladies and gentlemen. Iceman, Motor Cop Chronicles. Check out his podcast. Nancy Hammond, thank you, madam. Nick Adams, everybody. Paul Maloney. The great Raymond Arsenal. Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, brother. Stay safe out there. Sasha McNabb, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Conway. Thank you. Scott Young. You are the man. Sean Clifford. Thank you, sir. Seth Wright. Sheriff Ronald Long. Thank you, Sheriff. Tammy Walsh, holding it down dispatch. Thank you, Tammy. Tony Fahey, Zachary Pleat, and George Tessier. Love you, buddy. See you at church, guys. That is the Patreon supporters list, Sergeant and above. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for listening to the men and women of law enforcement. I love you guys, and I will see you next week.